You may be the most well-known snowmobiler in the world. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you'd measure that, but you're way up there with your accomplishments. And right before we started this, you said something to me which just rings so true. You said, snowmobiling, which at one point was your passion, turned into your job, and you're still passionate about it, obviously. But you said right away that bow hunting is still like this passion that's not, you're not in the professional space around it quite the same way, and that it's a relief to you.
Well, what's funny is, I truly do love my job. I mean, I have one of the coolest jobs on the planet. I get paid to go do what I love, which is snowmobiling. But sometimes there's a big difference between wanting to do something and having to do something. And it's hard for people to understand that, and they just say, "Oh, poor pitiful you! You have to go snowmobile today." But there's just certain days where, man, I'd love to be at home with my kids and my family, and instead, Daddy's working. So, I guess that's what bow hunting is for me. Is I don't have to do it; I get to do it,
Yep.
and so I love being in the woods. I love just absolutely love the challenge, both physically and mentally, of the hunt, and have so much respect for elk, and just how gnarly they are. And you're in their terrain,
Yep.
and they have every advantage over you. And so the I think the thing I enjoy most about bow hunting is you can do 99% of the things right, and you can still not get the deal done. And so that's pretty satisfying for me.
Yeah, it's a different world than gun hunting for sure. I want to back up a second and get into this because we get asked about this all the time. About people reach out to me a lot and they're like, "Hey, I want a career in hunting. I love to hunt. I want to do it." And what you said about the snowmobiling still being a passion, but being your job. You run the backcountry tours. You do a lot of stuff around snowmobiling in a professional capacity. And we call it a first world problem, right? Like, oh, we're complaining about having this awesome job, but that's the way things are. So what I love about guys like you and other people I know who've really gone far with something cool. They've turned something that they're good at into their profession, and they're still passionate about it, is they always find that escape thing. And because you have to, because you'd burn yourself right to the ground. And you found it in bow hunting. And one of the reasons that I want to talk to you is I'm like, man, there probably isn't anybody out there who has the kind of perspective on the backcountry that you do. You just mentioned, how gnarly elk are, and you're in a position to be where they live, even though they might not be there right now because you guys still have a million feet of snow in Colorado in the high country. But you get to see the backcountry in a way that's different than most people.
Well, one thing that it is truly intriguing, and the more time, I mean, I've been running around in the woods since I was 6 years old, and so to have that much time and experience in the mountains, things just naturally happen and progress. And one of the things that's really hard to talk with my riders about is when we're snowmobiling, our goal is to get to the top. And much like elk, when they come down to the bottom, they feed with the water, and then they go back up, they're not walking straight up the hill. They're taking the path of least resistance to get to the place that they want to go. And when you look at a mountain is this huge canvas, and you're looking at it, it's like, man, how do they get up through there? Well, there's all of these natural benches and these places that the elk find. And, it is the exact same as when I'm riding my snowmobile. And that's really cool this happens so many times, and every time it happens, I'm sitting there laughing. I'm doing this gnarly line, crazy line, and I'm side hilling through these trees, and I'll park on something, and I'm taking a break, and I look over, and there's an elk rub right there, and I'm like, because that's the only place I could have stopped. The terrain led me to there, and it's the exact same thing that you run into elk hunting. Is the terrain naturally will lead you to these places, and the elk are doing the same thing. So that's why I will say that I've fortunately had a lot of success bow hunting. Is not necessarily that, okay, yeah, he can read terrain and find out where elk are, but it's about understanding, knowing, and working your butt off to get to those places.
So that's interesting because what it sounds to me like is, I grew up fishing a lot of rivers, a lot of streams, trout fishing, smallmouth rivers, whatever, and you learn to read water. You spend enough time
Yeah.
there, you know where they like to be, you know where the current seams are, you know what's going to happen, in this rapids versus that or whatever. And when you fish with somebody who, maybe grew up lake fishing or it doesn't have as much experience, they don't look at the water the same way. And what you're saying, like me being from Minnesota, if I showed up in the mountains of Colorado, whatever unit, and I looked at it, I wouldn't see this
It'd be tough.
basin and this hog's back and these ridges the same way as you. And that's something I never would have expected to hear out of you, is that just choosing your lines, because you're not just riding trails,
Yeah.
like, I mean, people think, I think people think of snowmobiling generally a lot different than how you're doing it.
Yep.
And so you're actually picking like a kind of like a freestyle climber, like rock climber. You're picking a line that looks like it's going to get you up to this destination, and there's no trail there. And that's exactly what an elk has to do.
Exactly. And there's so many elements working against you: steepness, thickness of trees, all of those things. And it's the same. And I know I've already said this, but I got to reiterate it. I mean, it is the exact same when you're elk hunting. If you're staring at your boots walking, you will fail. Like you won't get to the place that you need to get. So your eyes are up. You're anticipating what's ahead of you. You're anticipating where the elk are going to go, or where they could potentially be. And again, that's very enjoyable for me, is playing that chess match.
So do you think, and my experience elk hunting and mule deer hunting and just general Western hunting is a lot less than a guy like you who lives there. And so I feel like sometimes I'm going somewhere in the mountains and I just blunder into something, blunder into an elk or a mule deer, and you blow them out, whatever, because you're not paying attention. You're, like you said, you're staring at your feet because you're wore out and there's no oxygen up there. But part of it probably is because intuitively we're sort of taking the path of least resistance too.
Yep.
If we want to get to a mountain basin to glass or something, I might not be thinking of it the same way you are, but it's probably, at least at some level, an instinct thing where you're like, well, that's going to be the easiest way to kind of weave my way up there. That's the same thing those animals are doing.
It's exactly the same, and that is one of the things that, I mean, there's so many facets of elk hunting that have to fall into your lap for it all to work. Is you can't be behind elk. I mean, that's one of the lessons that I've learned over the years, is you get that perfect view of an elk's butt and you are so screwed. You're never catching an elk because they're bigger than you, they're better than you, they know the terrain better and all of that stuff. So it's all about, again, that chess match of trying to get ahead of them, anticipating, that's one of the reasons that I train so hard from that springtime. So it's funny, when I get off my snowmobile, that's when it's time to actually get in shape. And snowmobile shape and hunting shape are two completely different things. And basically from April 1 until the start of archery, I'm in elk mode, trying to make sure I can. Yeah, it's crazy, man. You put a 30-pound pack on you and then you go get into that gnarly terrain and you're walking 10 to 12 miles a day. It is very challenging.
It's no joke. And I'm glad you said 30 pounds instead of 100, like everybody says, which is total BS. I mean,
Yep.
if you, I tell this a lot because I get asked a lot from Midwestern and Eastern guys who want to go out elk hunting. And, they think, well, I'm going to train, I'm going to put sandbags in my pack and I'm going to go walk, whatever. And I'm going to get, I'm going to be carrying 75, 80 pounds in there. And I'm like, no, like you don't even know. Go to the gym sometime and pick up one 45-pound dumbbell. And that's no joke. Now put that in your pack and walk around with it. And then go climb 1,000 vertical feet. It's a crazy thing that we kind of like overestimate our abilities a lot of times till you get there and then you go, oh man, like this is real.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's really cool of where bow hunting, the industry, has come, is I used to be the guy who would get up super early, go hunt in the morning, and then when the elk are laid down, I'd come back, and then I'd go out in the evening. I quickly found that I was exerting way more energy for these very small moments to actually get to hunt, and so that led me into the backpacking game, and actually reading Cameron Haynes's book. That got me pretty stoked about. So you just sleep with the elk, huh? You put a tent on your back and head in. I'm like, that sounds just like my style. And so, and 30 pounds at the max. When I leave the truck for a 2 night or 3 night stay, if I'm anything over 30, I will not be able to keep up with the elk.
Yep.
I mean, you just physically can't. I can't anyway.
Yep.
And so I like to be light. I like to cover a lot of ground. If there aren't elk in one basin, I'm going to go over to another basin. And the only way you can do that is to be light. And all this stuff right now is so cool. I mean, titanium this and carbon that and lightweight tents. And so the technology has come a long ways, and it really makes it even more enjoyable out there.
Oh man, it's crazy how much access we have to good gear now. I want to talk about that with you, but I want to back up a second because your point with keeping at 30 pounds, being able to move, knowing if you go in, you can stay with them. That kind of links back to what you said about following elk. Because when you said that, people think they're going to get out there, they're going to hear an elk bugle, see them walking through the meadow, and they're going to catch up. You're going to get busted every time if you get close, which is a big if. And this is something you learn the hard way if you're a whitetail hunter and you go hunt anything out west, spot and stock. You're gonna chase something because you're gonna see that opportunity slipping out of your life. And I've done it, elk, mule deer. I did it, on pigs, wild pigs. You watch wild pigs feeding, and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna catch up to them. Almost always you get busted. You got to get in front of these animals. And with an elk, you think about a horse out there walking, like a horse-sized critter. That sucker's eating up ground like you can't even imagine most of the time. Like it's unreal to see them cover ground and watch them go up a mountainside. And so where I'm going with this is your strategy of not just going up and coming down, going up and coming down, where you're so conscious of burning all that energy and that time, but instead saying, I'm going to stay there with them. It gives you the option for patience. Because you can say, if those elk are going into that dark timber to bed for the day, you don't have to chase them and force something. You can just wait on, take a little nap on the hillside or whatever, but you can wait on them until that hunting situation that's beneficial to you, the thermals are right, everything's right, unfolds instead of rushing it.
Yeah. Well, and the biggest problem is to your point, is if you bust a herd, they can go over 2 ridges and it takes them literally, 15 minutes to get over there, and it takes you 3 hours to get over there. And so that just doesn't make sense. And so, you have to play your cards right. And with my tent on my back, I have that advantage of being able to do that. And then one of the coolest things about staying out in the woods is, so you get your tent set up, you're eating your mountain house, you're just about getting ready to go to bed, and then all of a sudden you just hear those elk firing off at night. It's so cool because it gives you an idea of where they're going to be in the morning. You can, and then that wind is pretty consistent in the morning. It's coming down until the thermal switch to go up. Yep. So, all night it's tough to get sleep because elk are firing off. And then in your mind, you've got your strategic plan for the morning. But it's such an advantage. And the thing that I've really learned in bow hunting is to maximize your opportunities, because sometimes you don't get a ton of opportunities. And so you need to be smart about them and not just squander them away.
Yeah. Well, that's, that you can't make that point enough for bow hunters, especially when it comes to elk. You might go out on a 7-day trip or a 10-day trip and get one opportunity, especially, if your standards are pretty high. But even if you're like, hey, I just want a cow, I want any legal bull, whatever, you might not be around elk for 5 days. It might take you that long. Or like you said, you might find them and blow them out, and getting back on them again could be could take you days. I mean, I can remember elk hunting, I think 2 or 3 years ago, where I went like 4 days with nothing. I mean, no sightings, no bugles. It was early. I mean, they weren't bugling like crazy anyway, but it's like, it's, mentally to stay in the game then when you're like, I got nothing going. I don't know if there's an elk between me and the next peaks I can see, but that freedom of having that, all your camp on your back and everything and just being able to go wherever is so crucial to success.
Yeah. And elk hunting is definitely physical for sure, but the mental aspect of hunting elk is the most important. And it's easy to get down. It's easy. Yeah. And this has happened to me so many times, I'll do something silly and I'll bust one, right? Bust a group and get so upset at myself for ruining it. And then I'm walking through the woods, not quiet and just covering ground. And then I'll bust another one right there because mentally I was not, I was out of it just for that short little time. And it's like, you never know where they're going to be. They're being quiet for a reason. I mean, You get that little window when they're crazy in the rut and they're bugling, they're making noise. I mean, that's obviously as a hunter, that's what you're looking for and hoping for. But that's not necessarily always the case. And if you put yourself in those situations in that terrain where they could potentially be, well, they could potentially be there. And those big bulls, the reason they're big is because they're smart.
Yep. Well, and that what you mentioned about the mental aspect of it. We get into this a lot, and I'm getting to the point in my life where I'm starting to believe that there is no like real disconnect between the mental and the physical. Like we look at elk hunting, like you mentioned, as got to get in shape, got to get in shape, got to get in shape, and 100%. Yeah, get in as best shape as you can, and then get in better shape. But I think the mental part of it. I think that physical and mental are so linked together with us now, and being mentally okay with, not seeing elk for 4 days and climbing the mountains every morning is so tied to being physically okay. Like, I just think that they're like you said, we don't give the mental aspect enough credit. And I think it's huge. And I think it's so tied to pushing yourself physically.
Well, and I think the way it ties together for me is I prepare myself physically enough to be where if I go out a morning and they're not there, and then you're glassing and they're 2 miles away or 4 drainages away, and the normal person would look at that and say, "There's no way in hell I could make it over there." Me, physically and mentally, I'm like, if there's an elk, I'm going. That means there's a chance to see something, to put myself in a position to harvest an animal. And I mean, mentally, that doesn't bother me at all because I know I've prepared myself physically to go get the job done.
Yep. Well, and I think your perspective on that is a, been there, done that, know what the reward is for getting there, knowing if you see them, it's always worth the effort. I think a lot of people going out on their first elk hunt or who don't have a lot of experience don't understand how much of a reality that situation is, where you don't have elk close to you and you have to go work into them somehow, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, it's a lot of people, this is the outdoor media's fault partially, but a lot of people think I'm going to go have that perfect elk hunt, right? I'm going to find that meadow on my Onyx or aerial photos or whatever. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to call in this bull that's going to be screaming his head off and blowing snot out of his nose. And that's what's going to happen. And the physical part's going to be packing him out. And it's like, yeah, that's the physical part, but there's so much that's probably going to happen before that. And the mental aspect of it is like understanding you probably got it wrong right away. Like you're scouting everything. You might have put yourself in like somewhat of the right neighborhood, but you probably didn't get it 100% right. And so you're going to have to do what you're talking about to make those changes and get where those elk actually are.
Yeah, that's I don't know if I've ever had a hunt where it was that picture perfect TV moment,
Yep.
It was there's been so many of them where it fell into your lap, but not how you expected it. But it was because you put yourself in the right situation, and or you got stumbled into a little bit of luck. And the biggest thing for me is it's all about the wind, and that makes it tough, especially when the thermals are switching. That afternoon hunt is really tricky because you've got wind coming up, but then it's going to switch when that sun goes down. And so I remember a hunt last year where I'm like, I am in the perfect spot and everything is going good. And that sun dipped behind that peak and that wind switched. And literally, I mean, it was, elk are feeding by me, bulls behind me. And it took one cow to go like that, it raised the nose and I'm like, oh no. And, it took me the entire day to get myself set up into that position, and one little swirl of the wind and it screwed me. But that is, I love failure. I love failing. I love not being able to get it done every single time, because that makes me learn. And that learning aspect of it, it truly makes you a very good hunter. And I will say bow hunting has completely ruined rifle hunting for me. I do not have much of a desire to go shoot an elk with a rifle. Although it's funny, every year, at the end of the elk season, and I try to count how many times I say, if I just would have had a gun,
Yep.
that 100-yard barrier with a bow is those elk get into that 100-yard range and they know something's up. And sometimes you can beat it and sometimes you can't.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that's so cool about bow hunting is, we are wired to want challenges. Like even though we can have a cushy lifestyle and not challenge ourselves for anything if we choose that route, I think we're just inherently wired to be intrigued by like challenge and overcome them. Like, I think that's like an evolutionary thing. And I love that you said that you love failure, because, really you probably, like, in the moment, you don't love failure. Like in the moment, you're like, I hate failure. This sucks. But when you kind of come out of that day or that hunt, that makes you a better hunter.
Oh,
like when you make that dumb decision that costs you, or just the wind does that one thing that you had no control over, it just, the next time you're in that situation, you'll do something probably a little bit different. And I'm always interested in that, being part of the hunting media. I see people who want to hunt the same way year to year and have like the easiest hunts possible. You see this, I don't see this in elk as much because it's just harder to pull off, but whitetails, you see it all the freaking time. And I'm like, why don't you want to hunt? Like, don't you want the challenge of it? And they don't. Most of the time they want to be comfortable and they want to kill something big and move on to the next thing. And I just, hey, do whatever. But to me, I just look at what you're talking about. I'm like, that's what I want. Like, I want that razor edge between, success and failure, because you're going to go the wrong way a lot.